This morning, we're here to discuss the President's fiscal year 2025 budget request for the Forest Service. I'd like to begin by thanking Chief Randy Moore and the Forest Service Budget Director, Mark Lichtenstein, for being with us this morning. Thank you both. I look forward to hearing about the justification for the 6.5% increase requested over fiscal year 2024 enacted appropriations. Although May would normally be just the start of the fire season, we've already had record-breaking wildfires, as is becoming all too common. In February, while it was still snowing, over 1 million acres in Texas burned, killing 2 people and destroying 130 homes. All signs point to a very active fire year in the U.S., and I know my colleagues from western states are on pins and needles watching the next ignition that could devastate their communities. Our committee has considered several bills that would support an improved wildfire response network, from increasing the use of technology for wildfire detection to integrating the local communities, loggers, and volunteer firefighters into wildfire suppression efforts on federal land. In the meantime, Congress has tried to address this problem at the source by investing heavily in hazardous fuels reduction. Between the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, the Forest Service has been given, has been given about $12 billion on top of your annual appropriations. Now that we're a few years into those laws, today is a good opportunity for us to take a stock of how the Forest Service is implementing those historic investments, as well as the proposed budget for the fiscal year 2025. As I mentioned, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the IRA will add a significant extra boost to the Forest Service budget, around 30% extra for forest management each year. To be honest, Chief Moore, I am frustrated how little these extra investments have moved the needle on the agency's performance metrics. I do appreciate that last year was a banner year for the Forest Service in terms of acres treated, more than 4.3 million acres. That's 1 million acres more than the previous year, and it sets an agency record. Some of your performance metrics were less encouraging. For example, your timber target for last year was 3.4 billion board feet. You missed that by about 260 million board feet. You had a target of 16 improved watersheds. You only managed 6. You've told us before that it takes time to develop these projects and we should be patient. Instead of continuing to ramp up in treatments, however, the agency's target is actually going down over the next 2 years. So one of the issues I hope we'll explore today is why the historic funding provided by those 2 bills, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the IRA, aren't translating better into on-the-ground action. The backdrop to our discussion beyond the impending fire season is a rash of sawmill closures this year, including 6 in my own home state of West Virginia. I knew that wood products markets has been especially volatile since the pandemic. We've heard a number of reports, however, that long-standing sawmills are simply running out of nearby material and need to haul logs in from further and further away, which significantly cuts into their already thin margins. More consistent and reliable offerings from local federal forest would undoubtedly help these struggling operators. What's also concerning to me about these mill closures is that the Forest Service's wildfire crisis strategy is fundamentally dependent on a robust network of mills that can process the material from our nation's forest. As we recently heard at our hearing with the Wildfire Commission, revenue-generating timber harvests are critical to pay for more complex treatments, prescribed fire and reforestation. If done right, timber harvest can provide a return to the federal taxpayer, increase the health of our forest, and support our critical industry partners. The Forest Service has used some innovative models in the past. For example, last year the agency piloted a timber transport project to salvage burned timber in California and ship it to struggling sawmills in Wyoming. That makes all the sense in the world. We shouldn't just be letting salvageable timber rot. I've said this so many times in these hearings. In the long term, Congress can also help develop markets for the small diameter timber that often comes from wildfire mitigation projects as we're thinning and cleaning. In fact, several of the provisions in a bill I introduced with Ranking Member Barrasso, the America's Revegetation and Carbon Sequestration Act, would do just that. However, we simply cannot afford to lose all of our existing mill infrastructure while that market grows. And I hope that we will hear how the Forest Service can further expand on efforts like the Timber Transport Project. Lastly, I know that the fire and forestry often get the lion's share of attention. But I also want to highlight the tremendous role that our national forest plays when it comes to our outdoor recreation economy. Last year, the 159 million visitors to Forest Service lands generated billions in economic activity, and supported nearly 180,000 jobs. Unfortunately, the Forest Service has a deferred maintenance backlog of more than $7 billion, including $5 billion in maintenance just for the roads alone. This should concern all of us. The roads don't just provide access to our recreation lands, but are vital arteries for rural communities. Perhaps even more concerning, a road in poor conditions threatens our ability to deploy firefighters where they are needed and stop a wildfire before it grows to catastrophic size. As we approach the expiration of the mandatory funding for facilities maintenance that we provide in the Great American Outdoors Act, it's worth asking what changes could be made to better address the next set of hurdles facing the Forest Service. Chief Moore, I want to thank you again for being here today. I think I speak for all of us when I say that we don't just want you to succeed, we need you to succeed. I look forward to hearing your perspective on these issues and your plans for the year ahead. And with that, I'll turn to my ranking member, my friend, Senator Barrasso, for his opening statement.
Well, thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding days here. Chief Moore, thanks so much for coming back. I share your concerns. Historic investments, failure to meet the targets. I mean, that's what you've pointed out. That's what people on both sides of this aisle have continued to point out year after year. Like Wyoming's forests, including our 8 national forests, help sustain our way of life. They support our local communities. As is the case all across the West, our forests face many challenges, including wildfire, drought, insect and disease outbreaks. We face additional pressures, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, from the sawmill closures. You know, in 1976, Wyoming sawmills could process over 300 million board feet each year. Forests were healthy, forests were productive. According to the Forest Service's latest statistics, Wyoming sawmills can now process just over 100 million board feet. So that goes from 300 million down to 100 million. That's a 2/3 drop in our capacity. And now the health of our national forests in Wyoming is poor. The wildfire risk is high. And if we don't make things better in a way to manage our national forests, the risks are going to keep growing. Things are going to get worse. So I look forward to hearing how the Forest Service intends to hit the targets to address these critical challenges. And I'm pleased with some of the priorities in the budget. Funding to protect our communities from catastrophic fire. Also a pay raise for our wildland firefighters. I do have concerns also about the budget, though, because for years the Forest Service has asked Congress for more and more money, and we've heard it from both sides of the aisle. That money has been granted. Congress has responded by giving the agency billions of dollars in additional taxpayer funds. Since 2021, Congress has given the agency more than $40 billion, with a B, $40 billion. Yet the Forest Service has not treated more acres. It's not sold more timber. It's not expedited the environmental review process for forest management projects. Mr. Chairman, the question continues, where have all these taxpayer dollars gone? Now, I acknowledge the Forest Service faces enormous challenges as it combats wildfires. Yet, despite having more money than ever, the agency has not done the work on the ground to address the crisis. In fact, the agency expects to treat fewer acres than it did last year this year, and for the timber harvest levels to remain flat in fiscal year 2025. This is completely unacceptable. In Wyoming, sustainable timber harvests support our local communities. They reduce wildfire risk, they improve forest health, but year after year we find ourselves in the same situation. Inconsistent log supplies from the national forests undermine our local sawmills. Without a dependable and an affordable supply of timber from our public lands, these family-owned businesses cannot survive, and we know it all too well in Wyoming. Just last month, Nyman Enterprises, a family business based in Hewlett, Wyoming, had to announce layoffs. They hated doing it. This was a direct result of the Forest Service's decision to reduce timber harvest levels in the Black Hills National Forest. The Forest Service has upended the lives of 50 hard-working employees and their families. It's jeopardized jobs at nearby wood product facilities, and it has put at risk the health of the Black Hills National Forest. The decision to reduce the timber sale program on the Black Hills will reverse years of progress. Without active management, that forest is going to return to the same condition that resulted in the wildfires and the beetle kill. This is exactly what we are trying to avoid. Yet the Forest Service seems indifferent to the consequences of their own inaction. There's broad agreement on this committee that the Forest Service is not meeting the challenges that it confronts. The Forest Service no longer safeguards and promotes forest health. It's now just managing the deterioration of our national forests. The Forest Service must change course, must start managing our forests in a serious and credible way. We know what works, we know what we need to do, and the forest product sector is willing to help get the work done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And we'll start with our questions, our opening statement now. Senator Chief Moore.
Chair Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify today, and we're grateful for your continued support. The President's budget names 3 primary goals for us: to modernize wildland fire management, to sustain investments critical to our mission, and to ensure equitable access and benefits to America. Today, I'll share our progress as we put money to work to confront serious challenges. I'll share how our work will continue to be a sound investment. We directly steward 193 million acres of National Forest System lands, and we reach across boundaries to assist states, tribes, and communities, as well as private landowners, to keep millions of forested acres healthy and productive. Every American benefits from these forests directly or indirectly. Together, these lands provide basic needs for life, clean air and water, and while they contribute to the energy production and they support the local economies. National forests alone contribute more than 410,000 jobs and $44.3 billion to the gross domestic product. To sustain productivity and health, forests must be able to withstand threats posed by wildfires, climate change, drought, insects, and disease. We invested resources to act and to ensure that we do just that. Foremost, we prioritize work to reduce wildfire risk, safeguard communities, and create resilient forests. In 2022, we launched a 10-year wildfire crisis strategy, and we have moved to implement it. Annual appropriations, coupled with the historic bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act, provided us an extraordinary opportunity to take bold and strategic actions. We did just that. We progressed to deliver on a promise to increase the pace and scale of our treatments. We're not just treating any acre, we're treating the right acres in the right places and at the right scale. We focused initial efforts on 21 priority landscapes within western firesheds that are at the highest risk. They account for roughly 80% of the wildfire risk. These investments are paying dividends. Experts report that roughly $700 billion worth of housing and infrastructure are at risk within these priority landscapes, and this includes $6.5 billion of municipal watersheds, which supply drinking water to 12 million people. In the last 2 years, we reduced the average wildfire risk to these assets by 8%. We reduced the risk for infrastructure by 8% for housing, and then we also reduced the risk to watersheds by 12%. So what does that mean? It means that more than $175 million worth of homes were at risk. In Stanislaus National Forest, 17 communities are at lower risk, including the towns of Cold Springs and Strawberry. 1 million socially vulnerable people are at less risk. Nearly half of the nation's forest lands and priority landscapes are now considered unlikely to burn at high intensity. We must remain on course and build on these gains. We must also invest in our firefighters. We recognize the urgency of investing in a permanent and comprehensive pay increase to provide a more livable wage, enhance recruitment, and stabilize retention. We must also improve housing conditions and provide better care for firefighters' physical and mental health. We look forward to seeing an end to reports of firefighters living in cars with few benefits and limited mental health care. In addition to work to address the wildfire crisis and firefighters, we continue to take actions that support access and benefits from forests. Visitor use, hunting and fishing, energy and minerals development, forest products, and livestock growth generate 69% of the contributions to the economy. Thanks to the Great American Outdoor Act funds, we relieve some of the pressure from the $8.6 billion maintenance backlog. The budget requests $58 million to maintain critical recreation services with a focus on offering welcoming and equitable opportunities. We're also making a difference in our urban environments. The Forest Service and partners are planning and maintaining trees in cities and suburbs where about 84% of Americans live. Trees combat extreme heat and climate change, and it also improves access to nature. The 2025 budget returns basic funding to most programs. This includes forest products, which are vital to sustaining rural communities. This includes sustainable timber supply. We know it's a critical component and is part of a complex market-driven system. While we don't control markets, we can support industry through forest products and wood innovations, which help mills adapt and modernize. While the current industry adapts, the agency has taken strides to support the existing industry by, one, investing nearly $80 million over the last 3 years by directly supporting sawmills and other forest products manufacturing facilities, expanding wood baskets to the mills through the Build and Timber Transport Program, authorizing extensions to timber sale contracts to provide relief from the decline of demand for the paper product. So in closing, we're fully committed to meeting the challenges before us with resources that Congress has provided, and the people of America deserve nothing less than to see their money put to work for the benefit of all. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
We'll start our questions now. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Chief, your budget indicates you've increased the size of your workforce by more than 3,000 employees since 2021. 3,000. I understand about a month ago you instituted a 30-day hiring pause for non-fire staff in order to conduct a strategic assessment of your staffing and get a handle on your budget. So we'd like to know what you came up with.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, actually, we increased our workforce by 4,000 people, and that was our plan from the beginning. We lost about 40% of our non-fire workforce over the last 20 years.
How many were hired in areas that were vacant for years and you filled those positions, or an area did you beef up where it was needed?
Well, so we did a number of things. We had to bring in a new skill set to complement the skill sets that we currently have. And we looked at the trends that are developing in this country, and it's things around working with partners, working with communities. And so we also needed to add to our skill set people that know how to work with communities, know how to bring people to the table to facilitate and convene meetings, because what we ultimately want to do is share the decision space with local communities. And so we had to invest in skill sets.
Gotcha. How much of this was going to your bonuses for your present employees, I'm saying the people you have on staff, did much of that percentage of the money you received go for that or for actually hiring new people?
No, we routinely provide bonuses based on performance at the end of the year, so it was nothing extra with this money.
If you could give us a breakdown on what kind of employees were hired and how they're contributing to the agency's mission, it'd be very helpful for this committee.
Be glad to do that.
Second thing is, since 2020, the amount of National Forest System lands in need of manual reforestation has increased by more than 260%, due to catastrophic wildfires. Yet the Forest Service has said that only 6% of post-wildfire planning needs are met annually. If it's growing at that rate and you're not even touching it.
Well, first, Mr. Chairman, I want to say thanks to Congress for the Replant Act.
Sure.
Because it has given us the ability to lift the cap that we had on reforestation.
Is my figures wrong here? Have you done more than 6%?
No, I wouldn't argue with your figures.
This is a pretty poor performance early on that, as far as getting up to speed. Does the
may I respond?
Let me just say this: does the need to clear hazardous trees from burnt acres increase the cost for reforestation projects? So you have a burnt area. The way I understand it, it just kind of sits there until it rots away and nothing gets reforested in those areas. Can you do both at simultaneously?
No. So for context, prior to the Replant Act, we had a cap of about $30 million for reforestation. The problem that we've been having over the last, let's say, 15 to 20 years is that every year the number of acres burned has been increasing. And so on average, you add in about 500,000 acres per year, and we've only been able to treat about anywhere between 100 to 200,000 acres based on the funding level.
Let me ask you, the one thing that bothered me more than anything is basically salvaging the burnt timber that we have that still has value to it. Why are we not able to do that?
Well, it's an excellent question, and it's a really complex answer, at least multiple reasons that contribute to this.
Okay.
One is that, when we try and have large timber sale projects to recoup the salvage, many times we get litigated on that. And even where we are litigated, many times.
Who litigates it? Why would they litigate?
Well,
Because you can reforest, you can basically cut and salvage and reforest at the same time.
Mr. Chairman, I know, you know, with our democratic process and the fact that we're a public agency, 300 million people can
Someone's upset, right?
Yeah, and so our challenge is, as we go through the litigation to defend why we're wanting to do what we want to do, winning is not the answer. Delaying these salvage sales long enough so that they begin to lose value so that they're not worth purchasing after a period of time. And depending on where you are, blue stain sets in, which reduces the value of the wood. The challenge we have is that how do we remove a lot of that timber in a really quick way? Okay. And so our approach has been to take small pieces of that and to do what we can to remove the timber while it has value.
Let me ask one more question. 25 mills, around 25 mills have shut down this year near our federal forests, including several in my own home state of West Virginia. I know the reasons for the shutdowns vary, but I'm concerned about the impact they're going to have on rural communities, as well as the impact on carrying out the Forest Service management goals. So what authorities do you have to ensure a consistent supply of federal timber and give these sawmills some ability to weather the current market volatility?
So we've been working with a lot of the sawmills. In fact, we've been looking at wood innovations, and over the last 3 years, we invested $79 million specifically to sawmills and to the industry to help them transition while this is going on in our country. And so the
only way they're going to transition is basically have access to the product.
Well, the market-driven conditions that they are responding to, which also has an impact on whether they are interested in a lot of the timber sales of national forests. When you look at the economy in and of itself, it's moving away from paper products. So that has a negative impact on some of the mills that produce that type of material. When you look at small diameter, low value type material, most of our facilities use the large commercial saw logs. And so a part of what we want to do is to help and work with industry to transition to have a more diversified portfolio, if you will, and look at some of the products, biofuel, biochar, nanocellulose material, cross-laminated timber. These are the types of technology that's emerging, but our infrastructure in general is not set up to use that type of material in abundance. And so we are trying to work with industry to transition to that. And I think that you're going to see some really interesting things come from industry sometime later this summer.
We hope.
I do think that they're making the adjustment.
Senator Barrasso.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Chief Moore, 63 million acres of our national forests, high or very high risk of wildfire right now. Past year, agency treated fewer than 4 million of those 63 million acres. Your agency plans this coming year to treat even less than that. It has 63 million, last time 4 million, now less than that this year with a budget, more and more money going, getting less and less. At this declining rate, it's going to take your agency about 2 decades just to treat all of the high-risk areas within our national forest today, but trees are going to continue to grow. Is this really a credible strategy, with all the money that's been moved to the Forest Service, a credible strategy to address this wildfire crisis that Congress is clearly behind the efforts financially to help commit to get done?
Yeah, you know, Senator Barrasso, I think that we're at a crossroads in this country, and I think a part of it is that for the last 100 years, we measured our performance on acres treated. And I think what the wildfire crisis strategy has given us an opportunity to do is take a look and see, is that the right metric for performance? And when you look at how this country has changed over the last 100 years since the Forest Service's existence, the #1 land use in this country is wildland-urban interface development. And so that has had an impact on the national forest because you have a lot of communities that are sitting adjacent to and right next to national forests. And so we have to ask ourselves, and I would love to dig deeper into this with you and this committee, what is the appropriate performance level? Is it acres treated or is it the right acres treated? And if our job is to protect communities from wildfires, we have to look at outcome-based reporting rather than output-based reporting, or at least the combination of the two. And so the outcome would be, did we protect the community from the risk of wildfire?
Well, we haven't been doing a very good job of protecting against wildfire. I mean, to me, this seems just a complete lack of urgency by your department in dealing with all of this. If you don't like the results, then you change the metrics. That's ridiculous. But that's ridiculous. We don't like the results. We have more and more wildfires. We had a hearing in Washington State about what was happening a number of years ago. It doesn't seem to be improving. It doesn't seem to get better at all, in spite of a massive additional expenditure of taxpayer money. We're not, to say we're going to change the way the metrics is absolutely ridiculous. So Nyman Enterprises announced layoffs and the shift reduction at its Spearfish Forest Products facility. I understand that the owner, Jim Nyman, did everything possible to avoid the layoffs. These layoffs are a direct result of reductions to the timber sale program for the Black Hills National Forest. What's the agency doing to help retain the remaining forest products infrastructure in the Black Hills?
Yeah, you know, as I indicated earlier, we've invested about $79 million specifically to sawmills, and we've worked directly with Mr. Lyman and his facility. As a matter of fact, when we look at the Timber Transport Authority, it originated in order to help him. So we moved timber from Northern California over to Wyoming to his facility. There are market-driven conditions that are not coming into play during these discussions. And it's multiple reasons why the industry is going through a transition now, and it's not just Forest Service supply. It's market-driven conditions. It's the cost of labor that's continuing to increase. It's the lack of labor shortages. It's a number of things that's contributing to these facilities.
We're not having a labor shortage. We're having a job shortage as a result of these decisions that have been made. So I find the answer unacceptable. Another question. Commissioners from Carbon County and Johnson County, Wyoming, wrote to you specifically, I have a copy of the letter, opposing the Forest Service's plan for old growth areas on our national forest. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to put this in the record.
Without objection.
Both counties asked to be made a cooperating agency. These requests were made in January and February. When can they expect to receive a response?
Well, so I'm not aware of specifically what you're talking about, but I will look into that, Senator, and get back with you on that.
Okay, so will you agree to make these counties a cooperating agency?
I can't say that without looking at what they're requesting, because, you know, when you look at what do they mean when they say a cooperating agency? And so we would want to dig into that to see specifically what they mean by that. There's a little C and a big C.
Because the concern clearly is that the Forest Service is drafting the old growth plan without state input, without local input, and that's why I have a bill that would stop the disastrous proposal. My final question, Mr. Chairman, is, Chief Moore, you talk a lot about the abundance of low and no value material in our national forests. The agency's own data also shows an abundance of large diameter, high value material in our national forests. Since 2021, Congress has given the Forest Service a massive infusion of taxpayer dollars. How is it that timber harvests in our national forests are today below what they were 6 years ago in 2018?
You know, actually, Senator, since 2002, we've seen a gradual increase in the amount of timber that's removed, as well as the number of acres that's treated. So I would say, and I have a chart here that will show you the increase from 2002 all the way into 2023. And so we are seeing a slight increase over that period of time, not a decrease.
I'm talking about the last 6 years.
Well,
2018 down to where they are now.
I would go all the way back to the 80s, where...
Go back to America wasn't discovered. We weren't harvesting anything, and now we got all the way up, but now we're dropping down in spite of the massive amount of... Mr. Chairman, my time is up.
You done?
I'm done. I got to be.
Senator Cantwell.
Chief Moore, I think the frustration you're hearing is that if you look at this panel here, we are on the front lines. And we all see innovative opportunities to have a better response. And that's what we want to see. We know that the ponderosa pine is going to burn down. And so we think, well, if that's what the predictions are because of the dry conditions, why not harvest that, put it into cross-laminated timber, make great economies in local communities, and store carbon instead. So I think that's something probably everybody on this panel would agree with. But as Senator Barrasso said, we're not moving fast enough to do that. And so I think we have very historic policies that need to shift. One of those, I believe, that needs to shift faster is the Small Business Administration Timber Set-Aside Program for stewardship contracts. Because these smaller mills are taking these innovation risks. They are saying, we will do cross-laminated timber, we will do innovative things, but you're not giving them the supply. So what can we do to make sure that the Small Business Timber Set-Aside Program actually works and you actually give these mills a supply? And that they're not, because right now they're not getting that supply, so they're barely hanging on.
Yeah. Yeah, Senator, first of all, I would support the SBA set aside. I would like to point out to you that we have what I would consider a significant success on the Manti LaSalle in Utah, where you had a small logger, and we worked with him to do his own marketing for material. And while that forest had not cut a lot of timber traditionally, historically, they've gone from almost no program to this logger now went from 1 truck to 9 trucks. They cannot keep up with.
Great, I only have a few minutes, so I've got to get to some other things. Would you provide me with an overlay map of where we think our most highest risk pine forests are going to burn down, and show me where you are willing to put set-aside small business agreements in the Pacific Northwest? Appreciate what you did in Utah, but I need to know what you will do for the Pacific Northwest. Could you provide that to us?
Sure, yes.
Okay. So Senator Cruz and I introduced a Fire Ready Nation bill to try to get more information out of NOAA because of their weather service forecast information is critical. Do you think that this legislation could help you in becoming aware of what the risks are for the Forest Service with better science coordination with NOAA?
Yes, I do. And in fact, we have a longstanding agreement with NOAA, and we do include them. I would also just like to add, and looking at the fires that happened down in New Mexico, we also, in addition to the larger weather station information, we also want to be able to have local and portable weather stations because of the local weather bursts that sometimes the larger weather station doesn't pick up. And so in that, we also need to look at some additional types of equipment that would give our on-the-ground people better information and better real-time information before they began to do a lot of prescribed burning.
Well, this is what we need. We absolutely need this. We lost firefighters because in the central part of our state, they had one weather forecast. And in Seattle, just over the ridge, over the mountains, they were saying it's something else.
Right.
High volatility. And we lost firefighters because we didn't have that information. So we want the best information. I need to ask you about fixed anchors in wilderness areas. These are important aspects of climbing that were there prior to designations of wilderness. Do you think that fixed anchors should be prohibited in wilderness areas?
So Senator, so there's people on both sides of that issue, and we are in the
asking
process
you.
now.
I'm asking you whether you think that.
Well, I can't give you an opinion until we reach out to our publics, right? And so we're in the process now of having a draft directives being put out. So we did receive comments back in January. In fact, we received about 9,000 comments, and so we are in the process of analyzing that before we move out with the final.
What do you want people to do in wilderness areas? Because I'd like them to go hiking and climbing, but if people have installed anchors and you're spending your time, instead of helping us get a CLT bill, focusing on removing fixed anchors, that's the wrong priority. So maybe we'll have to do legislation. But I believe that the answer is they belong, particularly in areas where they've already been the wilderness designation, fixed anchors belong. Please support the climbing industry that is benefiting from wilderness. That's why we have it, so people can go and enjoy it. Thank you very much, Chief Moore.
Senator Lee.
Chief Moore, I'd like to begin by asking you to clarify something, a term that I'm not familiar with. What do you mean by big C versus little c cooperating agency?
Well, so, you know, and it goes back to my experience from many years ago working with the county supervisors, county commissioners, wanting to have a say in what finally happens, you know, in our documents. And there's a way to do that. And I think the way to do that is to have a collaborative process with our publics, in particular our elected officials. And so we think that it's imperative that they be included in what's going on in their part.
It doesn't answer my question in any way. Look, I've got limited time. Maybe you can respond in writing. I really do need to know what the difference is between a big C and a lower C cooperating agency. Not defined in law, never heard of it before, not in any of your guidance documents, rules, anything like that. But look, I've got to move on. Just respond to that one in writing if you can. Look, the draft plan for the Manti-LaSalle National Forest proposes 122,780 acres of quote-unquote recommended wilderness. This is really concerning to me. Congress passed the Utah Wilderness Act in 1984. It's a product of a long, protracted, hard-fought compromise made by the state of Utah, and it's something that designated wilderness in exchange for assurance that no future Utah wilderness designations would be made. Now, the Forest Service appears to be ignoring this history, and both the state and the individual county resource management plans applicable to that area. The only way we get healthy forests is by having flexibility to perform active management of the forests. It turns out, as we've learned over the last few decades, you let the thing just go. That's terrible for forest health. What we're dealing with throughout Utah is this patchwork of designated wilderness, recommended wilderness, and inventoried roadless areas that make active management a nightmare and frankly, practically unachievable. These updated forest plans will only make the situation worse as you've got them drafted. Can you explain how these new wilderness recommendations were developed and why the state and local counties' input was apparently disregarded completely in the preferred alternative?
Yeah, so the forest supervisor is planning to meet with the county supervisors to cooperate on that forest plan issue.
And how'd that go?
It hasn't taken place yet. They are scheduled to have a meeting to discuss this very issue that you're bringing up. We'll be happy to let you know how they go once the meeting takes place.
Yeah, after the draft plan was released, but before that, it apparently didn't happen that way. I don't know why I should have any assurance that it'll go any better now. Now, look, every single state official and county commissioner that I talk to seems to be increasingly frustrated with the way that the Forest Service with the way the Forest Service manages Forest Service land. All these local officials ask for is a real seat at a real table in these important decisions that have to be made, decisions that affect us, our local communities, very directly, much more directly than they do anybody else. We all want healthy forests, and we all want to avoid catastrophic wildfires, but the consequences of bad policy hit some of us a lot more than they hit others. For example, in both the Ashley and the Manti-LaSalle proposals, the Forest Service appears willing to enter into co-management arrangements with tribes. But it refuses to incorporate state and county comments into the planning process. If the Forest Service can enter co-management arrangements with the tribes, why exactly can't it enter into similar arrangements with county governments and the state government?
Senator, we do honor the county government, and we do work with them, same as we work with tribes. In fact, we probably work more with the county governments than we do tribes.
With co-management? Co-management, the same way you got it with the tribes?
No, it's
not been my experience.
Yeah, well, you know, tribes are sovereign nations, so we deal with them differently than...
Yeah. States also are sovereign. They are co-sovereigns. States are co-sovereigns, and tribes also have their own elements of co-sovereignty.
Senator, we deal with the counties, and we work with the counties. They have a seat at the table, and I'm not sure... I'm not sure we're not doing just exactly what you say, because...
Well, I'm certain that you're not. I'm certain that you're not. Look, the 2001 roadless rule establishes prohibition on road construction and on timber harvesting on 58.5 million acres of inventoried roadless areas in National Forest Service lands, National Forest System lands. Has the 2001 roadless rule helped or hindered with wildfire mitigation efforts?
I suppose that's going to depend on your perspective, Senator.
Helped or hindered? Which one?
Well, I don't have a say in whether it helps or hinders. You know, I have to...
But you don't, maybe, regardless of what you do, does it? Just describe it. In your assessment, has it helped or hindered wildfire mitigation efforts?
Well, I don't think it was designed to help wildfire mitigation, sir.
Understood. Thank you.
Senator Heinrich.
Chief, welcome. A number of us on this committee worked really hard on the Great American Outdoors Act that gave 5 years of extra funding to tackle the maintenance backlog at a number of public land agencies, including yours. It's fixing up places like Sandia Crest Recreation Area. It's fixing up campsites in the Jemez National Recreation Area. We're now in year 4 of the 5. Can you walk through for me what percentage of Forest Service funds from fiscal year 21 and 22, the first 2, are actually under contract now?
Yeah. Senator, can I get you that information?
Can you get that for the record?
Sure.
Because I want to make sure, you know, we're seeing progress, but we're well into that now, and we want to make sure those funds make it to the ground because they really open up opportunities for local communities in terms of the economic opportunities that come with public land recreation. The Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission and the GAO found that there's not enough affordable, available, and adequate housing to recruit and retain wildland firefighters, something that you referenced in your testimony. You know, these are folks that families count on to protect them from these catastrophic wildfires. Is the funding that you requested in this budget enough to clear the backlog on firefighter housing maintenance?
No, sir, not by a long shot.
How much of a dent will it make?
So the backlog is about 350 million acres. And so anything less than that is not going to really get at the backlog.
No, I'm saying in terms of housing, the additional funds that you've requested, what scale of progress are you going to make in terms of making sure that our firefighters have access to adequate and well-constructed housing?
So in the funds that we're requesting now, I think we have about $25 million that we're planning to put toward improving the housing situation. In fact, we're looking at completely redoing one barracks and then making a lot of necessary changes to many of the other barracks and houses.
Can you get us a full list of those? Because it's a cart before the horse thing. If we don't have adequate housing, then we're not going to have the firefighting force to be able to actually deal with the challenges that some of my colleagues have described.
I would agree wholeheartedly.
When we last talked, the Forest Service was finalizing a contract to repair the Santa Fe National Forest fence that keeps cattle from trespassing onto the neighboring property, which is the Valles Caldera National Preserve. What's the status of that contract at this point?
So we've agreed to put up $1 million toward the construction of the fence, and we've also agreed to go halves on the maintenance of the fence once it's done.
And is that contract actually not the maintenance contract, but the repair contract? Has that been executed?
Where we have a meeting set up with the Park Service. We have an agreement in place, but we have not signed off on that agreement. But
okay.
The agreement would be halves on both the actual construction of the fence and the maintenance of the fence.
This has been a long time coming, so I would just urge you and Director Sams to figure this thing out because it's a continual source of friction in the area.
Yes.
Last week, the Lincoln National Forest shut down Sitting Bull Falls Recreation Area. It's a popular spot about an hour from Carlsbad that families enjoy over the summer in particular. Why is Sitting Bull Falls closed, and what's the Forest Service plan to get it reopened?
Yeah, so my information says that is not closed, even though there are some staffing challenges, but the facility is open. And there's also maintenance needs for that facility. But Senator...
Because my understanding, at least from what I've heard from the public, is that it's closed. So we need to get our staffs together on that and figure out what the plan is to make sure that, especially as we get into the summer season, when demand is particularly high, that we maximize that facility.
And in fact, my information tells me that they're ready for the Memorial Day weekend. And so I will double check that.
That would be a pleasant surprise. So okay. Let's work on that. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
We have Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, good to see you again. you were in front of the Interior Appropriations Subcommittee just about a month ago. You made a comment then that resonated with me. You said, I can tell you with certainty that if we do not have a vibrant timber industry, we're not going to be able to manage our forests and make them healthy and resilient. Good statement, but it just seems contradictory to the way that the Tongass and the Chugach National Forests are managed. The Forest Service has completely shifted away from offering viable inventories of timber, and in the case of the Tongass, they really have just pulled the rug out from under the industry. You and I have talked about this a lot, but they abandoned the transition policy that Secretary Vilsack forced on them during the Obama administration. So we have a timber industry that is practically non-existent right now. And it kind of speaks to your statement about it's impossible to have a healthy and resilient forest without a vibrant timber industry. Well, we don't have a vibrant timber industry. So can you share with me, other than research into end-use forest products, what is the Forest Service doing to help support the few remaining small mill operators that are located in the Tongass?
So Senator Murkowski, you know better than anyone just the history of timber there.
I know it all too well. I've lived it.
And I still stand by my statement that without a vibrant timber industry, we will not be able to manage our nation's
So what
forests.
do I tell our small mill operators there in Southeast? Is there a future for them, or do they need to just pack up, let their employees go elsewhere?
Well, I certainly think there's a future there. I think what we need to do is work on how much of that is available to be harvested. And I'm still committed.
Well, it's the largest national forest in the country.
Yes.
There's plenty of available timber. It's the supply, as you well know, and the sales that are put up that don't result in anything for even the smallest of the small timber sawmills.
And you know, Senator, we're guided by a lot of policies and regulations, and so...
And the policies and regulations are such that the Tongass has been shut down effectively for timber harvesting. I mean, that's pretty much it. Let me shift to the Southeast Alaska Sustainable Strategy, because that was Vilsack's promise. We're going to cut off timber, we're going to not be harvesting, or certainly not putting up available sales for timber there, but we're going to give you resources from the federal government. $25 million was the first tranche. And I had asked you last month about the funding that Secretary Vilsack had promised. He said, again, the $25 million is the first tranche. I asked for an update on additional funding. You shared with me the same thing that Secretary Vilsack did, that, well, Southeast has gotten funding through IJA and through IRA. That is true. But as I reminded everybody, this promise on the Southeast Sustainable Strategy was well before we had even thought about IJA or IRA. And so, in fairness, that does not count. That is not keeping the promise of Secretary Vilsack. So you indicated that you were going to double check on the status of where we are, what Southeast might be able to expect, because right now I've got these small local mills that are thinking, well, okay, maybe that's part of our survivability strategy, is that we're going to be getting some kind of support from these additional sources of funding from the Southeast Sustainable Strategy.
Yeah, Senator, you are right. We had the $25 million originally, and since then, we've provided an additional $50 million. But I'll look to see how much of that is IJA and how much of that is other funding. But I know that it was 50 additional million.
I bet I can beat you to the breakdown on that, unfortunately. One quick question here before my time is out. You know that just last week we introduced the Chugach Alaska Land Exchange Oil Spill Recovery Act. This grants Chugach ownership of approximately 65,000 acres of culturally significant, economically viable full estate and surface lands. This completes the promise under the Dingell Act. This is the result of several years of groundwork by the entire Alaska delegation and the working with the Department of Interior and Forest Service. I know you've worked on that, but I'm hoping that I can get your commitment that Forest Service is going to work proactively with our office so that we can advance this legislation and address this split state ownership challenge.
Yes, we're committed to continuing to work with you on that.
Okay, we want to get it done sooner than later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank both of you for being here today. Mr. Moore, I always appreciate your affection for our forests and your commitment to it, which I share. I feel every time I'm in the forest, I feel like I'm getting better. I'm getting somehow my life resolves itself in positive ways. I want to reiterate what Senator Cantwell talked about, the issues around fixed anchors in various parts of the national forests. And we've got a proposal in with the Outdoor Recreation Act that allows those fixed anchors that are in place to remain in place. The House bill's come across. We're trying to reconcile that. I think we are going to get it reconciled. So just to alert you that that's coming. There are two sides to this, but I look at the costs and the impositions to try and go out and remove fixed anchors or make it a decision process you've got to go through in every national park. It really doesn't seem to make very much sense. So, and I think there's certainly a strong sentiment that way throughout the Senate. Let me ask you a question about housing. We talked a little bit about housing for firefighters, but many of the smaller towns across the West, and to a certain extent in the East as well, are having housing issues. And I think local communities have asked us whether we could, talk to the Forest Service about doing joint venture partnerships for housing that might be for employees of the Forest Service, but also for local teachers or nurses, people that are not sufficiently compensated to be able to afford housing where they live. Is that something is there a opportunity there?
Absolutely. In fact, I think this is one of the crises facing America, and it certainly has an impact on the Forest Service. Your own state has been one of our pilot areas there on the White River National Forest, where we are looking at working with the community to build homes in exchange for homes for our employees. That really has set a tone that's starting to be spread across the nation to be creative in how we really address this issue. But it's all of our issues. It's all of our communities' issues. And so I'm glad to see where the communities are coming together to work with us and vice versa, trying to fix this issue. Because at the end of the day, if we do not have employees in many of these locations, we cannot do the job that you're asking us to do.
And in the end, we're all in it together. And I think that approach of White River is an excellent example. I know there are a couple examples you guys are working on it. I didn't want to brag about Colorado, again, being the innovator, but such as it is. And Mr. Lichtenstein, you haven't had a chance to really hold forth. I've got a more philosophical question, not in an adversarial tone, but really, I was governor for 8 years, and we had some of the worst. It was the beginning of this phase of wildfires that were immense. I mean, enormous, and they continue. I mean, people can argue back and forth, and we don't need to debate here the causes of the changing climate. But clearly, wildfires are increasing. The conditions, the humidity in the air, everything is changing to make them more frequent and worse. I was always puzzled, and I spent a lot of time on the firefighting out in the control centers. So often we would spend enormous amounts of money, and then the wind would change. And our fire line would be overrun. The fire would go around. The fires they are so malevolent. It's almost like they have an evil spirit, that our best intentions, they come back in directions we can't anticipate. How do we study that? How do we begin looking at whether you're flying over and dropping retardant mixed with water on the fire or digging trenches? I'm sure you guys must be doing studies, but at least at that point, there was nothing I could look at that gave me comfort that every state is now, I realize you guys are spending more money out of your budget as well, but states are doing the same thing. And I think there might be need for better study, and you probably are way ahead of me on this. No, Mr. Lichtenstein. I want the strategic
planner here.
Well, I appreciate.
Not that you aren't both strategically planning. I did not mean
I
that.
appreciate the question, and fire is a complex environment. Luckily, before I was a budget, I oversaw a lot of the fire program and understand that the changing conditions we face with fire just creates a situation that becomes more volatile and unpredictable. But we have done considerable amounts of research, particularly through the Rocky Mountain Research Station, which is kind of the hub of our fire research, that has really developed different thoughts around potential control points and different strategies to be able to manage these fires a little bit differently, where it's not so much about overwhelming force the entire time, but thinking about where do I actually use the resources I have available and the actual ecological conditions and quiescent periods and weather to actually be able to take advantage of those to address the fires more effectively.
Maybe I'll get our staff to reach out. I don't know, Mr. Moore, if you want to add anything to that. You don't need to add anything. I just want to make sure if you wanted to add something to that.
Well, the only thing I would add is what you'll see different now over the last couple of years is that part of the incident command team structure, we are allowing that local people to come into the tent to share information about local conditions.
Right.
There's been a lot of concern that sometimes the IC team doesn't have local knowledge. And so we've responded to that by including some locals in there to share that local knowledge.
That's good additional information. Thank you both for being here. I've got other questions on the Colorado River and some of the hydrology issues. We'll put those into writing. I yield back to the chair.
Senator Daines.
Chief Moore, this is a time of discussion as fires continue to multiply across our country. Many important forest management projects that would decrease the risk of catastrophic wildfires have been halted by litigation. In fact, in Montana alone, 300 million board feet, in fact, more than 300 million board feet is tied up by litigation. This stops the removal of hazardous fuels that are surrounding our communities as well as other high-risk areas. And just the threat of legal action forces the Forest Service to spend additional time making projects bulletproof against litigation. In fact, there's a small project in Montana where the Forest Service planned to harvest just over 1,000 acres, but spent 19 months from scoping to decision and created a 183-page environmental assessment. My bill that I have to fix the Ninth Circuit Cottonwood decision that passed this committee last May would be crucial in preventing some of the litigation that is stopping wildfire mitigation work, and I'll continue to urge its passage in the full Senate. I know it'd be a huge help for what you all have to do. But it's critical in the meantime that the Forest Service press forward with forest management projects and on-the-ground work. The Forest Service treated 4.3 million acres in fiscal 2023, with nearly half of those treatment acres being prescribed fire, and of those acres, nearly 3/4 being done in the South. While it's good that there is necessary work being done across the country, there are crisis landscapes in Montana and across the West where it's a bit more arid that need focus. The state of Montana, looking on the state efforts, more than tripled their acres treated from 2020 to 2023. At the same time, the Forest Service increased acres by about 34%, again, while the state of Montana tripled. We need to see the Forest Service follow the lead we're seeing in Montana from our state and place a greater emphasis and a sense of urgency on increasing treated acres. My question for you, Chief Moore, is why does the Forest Service fiscal year 25 budget decrease the target number of acres treated from fiscal year 24?
So here again, Senator, there is a lot there, so I'll try and respond to it in its entirety. When you look at our budget now, a lot of our budget goes toward hazardous fuel reduction, not timber production. When I look at the amount of timber that we are providing, we've seen a steady increase. I'll go national, but I'll come down to Montana. We've seen an increase over the last 20 years of about 30% increase in timber. And so while that perception is out there that we're not producing timber, it's not accurate when you look at what we're actually doing. Now, more specifically to Montana, I've gone out with Governor Gianforte to visit. I think it was the Basin Creek watershed area there where you have a community there that's threatened by wildfires. And as a result of what the state is doing, we match that to really treat the Basin Creek watershed area there. Montana in and of itself is our leader across the country in good neighbor authority and using that authority. And so we have a lot of really good work taking place in Montana. I will also tell you that Montana is our most litigious state in the country when it comes to forest products types of projects. And so you have a lot of that coming to bear there. But here again, I think that entire region, when I look at Montana and Idaho for that matter, they're doing some really excellent work with good neighbor authority and really getting work done.
You know, and thanks for coming out to Montana, too, and spending time with our governor. I appreciate that and seeing it firsthand. Just the bigger question, though, is why would the target decrease from 4.2 million to 4 million? I mean, at a time when we need more treatment, your target actually decreased year over year.
No, our target's actually gone up. When I look at the 2025,
Make sure we're talking the same numbers. At least what my numbers show is FY24, the target was 4.2 million acres.
oh, it has fuel.
It's fuel for
I was thinking timber.
hazardous fuel reduction. And the FY25 target is 4 million. So it's 200,000 acres less in terms of your target. That's the question. Why would it go down?
Yeah, I was thinking you meant timber production, not
Right.
acres treated.
I'm talking hazardous fuel reduction.
Yeah, so one reason the budget has gone down and has fuel reduction. And so.
And why would we take the budget down in hazardous fuel reduction?
Well, we had a loss in IRA. We've had a lot of increase in costs. You know,
Because, you know, you think about it, if you're reducing hazardous fuels, it's a way to try to preempt catastrophic wildfires, which are very expensive to fight once they begin.
Right, and the fundamental question that I was saying earlier that I think we really have to talk about, what is that new performance metric? Is it protecting communities? And is it protecting those critical watersheds that these communities depend on? And if it is, those acres are more expensive to treat. And where we have been measured by the number of acres achieved or treated, we have put ourselves in a position where we're doing random acts of restoration across the landscapes now because of that metric of outputs. And while that's important, Senator, what we're finding through the wildfire crisis strategy, what's even more important is protecting communities. And if you agree with that, then perhaps we need to look at outcomes based on the work that we're doing. Also, you have a lot of steep slopes that we're trying to get to. All of that is more expensive to try and achieve, and you do less work because it takes more to work in those areas.
Well, it's just, thank you for that. I know you're balancing competing priorities in terms of costs, but it's just troubling at a time when we're seeing increasingly buildups of hazardous fuels that the target of the Forest Service actually went down year over year. From 4.2 million to 4 million. I mean, you've got to look at where you got to spend, where you got to target. But I raise that as a real concern when you think about that's an investment too to try to reduce the cost to fight catastrophic wildfires. This is kind of pay me now or pay me later, and you pay a lot more later.
Well, give you an example. Last year, our target was 4 million, and we actually achieved 4.3 million. And so we achieved more than what our target was in this year for 25, when you look at where the budget is going, we don't have the same level of budget to do that amount of work, coupled with the areas that we're working in now, which is more expensive.
I know. Thank you. I've got to respect my colleagues' time. I'm over my time, Chief. Thank you.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Moore, Great to see you.
Good to see you again.
Thank you for always taking my calls when we need you to say thank you for the great work that you've been doing, and obviously when we're in a pinch and dealing with some challenges that there's no shortage of in the state of California. So I wanted to begin by thanking you and your entire team at the Forest Service for your work in general, but more specifically and more recently for your support in the expansion of both the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument in Northern California and the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument in Southern California, which includes additional acreage in the Western Angeles National Forest. It's a major accomplishment. Appreciate the partnership and working together, and thank you for the support of Eberling, who was with us at the celebration this last Saturday. I do want to turn to an issue that was touched on earlier in the hearing, that of federal firefighter pay. I was proud to introduce the Wildland Firefighter Payment Protection Act together with Senator Sinema, which would protect the pay raises secured for wildland firefighters in the bipartisan infrastructure law. My question to you, and for the record, the proposed budget for FY2025 provides $216 million to implement a permanent, comprehensive pay increase for the firefighter workforce. From you to the committee, how will these pay increases compare to the pay raises secured in the bipartisan infrastructure law?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. So one of the biggest differences is that the pay raise that's in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, it doesn't allow that increase to be carried over into retirement. And that's one of the biggest differences there. The other big difference between the two is that our recruitment and retention improves with a permanent version of that, as opposed to that temporary version of that that's been extended through the continuous resolution. And by the way, we really thank and appreciate Congress for extending it. We also know that we have a lot of nervous firefighters out there waiting to see if this is going to be permanent or not. And if by chance it's not, we probably can expect to see a lot of our firefighters leaving for better pay and better opportunities.
I know there's general recruitment and retention issues
Yes.
across the workforce, but I understand it's particularly acute amongst firefighters. So I think you answered my follow-up question. Would it be helpful to, for your efforts for Congress to pass a permanent pay increase? I'll assume the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think it would certainly help the federal workforce.
Yep. On a different topic, recreation.gov has been in the news. It's a popular website for users to book campsites, enter hiking lotteries, or reserve vehicle passes. And with each of these transactions, a small reservation fee is charged. Now, while many users expect that the entirety of their fees when booking on the website directly benefit the public lands that they treasure and that they visit, there's some of the money that is instead funneled to the website manager, which has been reported to be about $140 million in profits from 2018 to 2022. So I think it's important that we use thoughtful reservation systems that balance both our conservation efforts with public access. But I'm concerned that there's a little bit of lack of transparency here around the fee structure for the website. What's the status of the recreation.gov contract, and what is the Forest Service doing to increase transparency of lotteries and campsite applications?
Senator Padilla, I can get you more of the specifics that I have more assurance on in terms of its accuracy. So I provide that to you.
Okay, I'll take that as a follow-up and include in that, please, this was a topic of conversation in the subcommittee hearing yesterday with the Park Service, where I asked them to follow up on what are the best practices that they're considering in ensuring that we design an equitable reservation system, including what they may need from Congress to help improve outcomes. You've got to measure. The point I was making yesterday is it's one thing to build on access, right? These monument expansions, for example, every new national park that's created provides access for the American public. We know that there's a gap in access, a nature gap, if you will, which particular communities of color, lower-income communities visit the parks less. And I just want to make sure that when there's a reservation system online, the way it's designed, the way people interface with it, it's a tool to help close the gap,
Yes.
not exacerbate that gap. So if you can include some of that information in your follow-up, I'd really appreciate it. But thank you again for your service. Now, I pass it over to Senator Hoeven for questions.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Chief, good to have you here. Thanks to both of you gentlemen for joining us. We appreciate you and your work. And Chief, we're working on getting you out to North Dakota on the national grasslands the week of June 24. Does that still sound like something that you're planning to work on with us to get done?
Yes, all I know, Senator, is it is June, and I have agreed to it. I don't know the specific date, but I know that we're working with your staff.
Yeah, they told us June 24 that week. And so we'll work with your staff and look for it. Obviously, getting out there and seeing our cowboys and energy producers and tourism officials and everybody else, they really appreciate it. And they'll turn out to see it and have an opportunity to visit with you. So we appreciate that. You've got a travel management plan you're working on. I think it really goes to where you're identifying all your roads and access points out in the grasslands. I guess my question there is, will you commit to consulting with all relevant stakeholders as you work on that travel management plan?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and that's something that obviously we can talk about when you're out there as well. I think it was last year we had Deputy Chief French out there. He did a great job, so he set a high bar for you.
I told him to be on standby to come with me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he really put the pressure on. He actually did a great job. We appreciate him being out there and met with our folks. But also, as a result of that effort, announced, the additional funding for noxious weeds, which is really important. The first $1.7 million has been allocated, but a commitment of $4.5 million. I want to know that you stand behind that and that that'll be something we can talk to our grazers about.
Yes, absolutely.
Good, thank you. Senator Padilla asked you about staffing needs, and do you think you're making some progress there? That is a real issue for us as well, having the staff out there.
Yeah, we are making some progress on that. Our challenge really, and it's not something that only a Forest Service issue. It's an issue for many of our communities. But we are struggling from time to time to find the expertise to come to some locations because of the cost of living. It's a challenge.
It is, yeah. And so I just want to emphasize that as well. We really need folks out there, in our part of the world too. Deferred maintenance, we passed the Great American Outdoors Act, as you know, to get at a lot of things, one of which was deferred maintenance in a big way, not only in the parks, but on the national grasslands and other places as well. What steps are you, two things I want to go at here. One is, our state's putting money into this on a partnership basis with you all. And the next thing I'm going to ask you about is our Joint Chiefs program, with the NRCS. And so both are joint programs where we're trying to leverage your abilities to get stuff done out there. And that includes a lot of things. I mean, you all are focused on a lot of the aspects that may go to tourism, some of those kind of things. But our grazers, and ranchers, cowboys out there, they need some fencing, they need water lines, they need dugouts, all those things. They need enhancements on the ground, like I think both Daines and Senator Padilla were maybe talking about, and Hickenlooper in terms of, addressing fire, prescribed burns, all that kind of stuff. Talk to me about both the partnership with the state on those issues, where we'll provide money to partner with you, as well as the Joint Chiefs program, which Bennett and I have worked on legislatively here.
Yeah, so on the Good Neighbor Authority, that program has grown really significant, working with the state, locals. We were hoping that, we're seeing some language in the Farm Bill that would treat the counties and the tribes the same as the states, which would allow them to keep the revenues in the counties and in the areas where it was generated. So I believe that is in a version of the Farm Bill as we go forward. But I think that would make a large difference in what the amount of work that we're able to do on the ground. I think when you look at the other piece there in terms of the Joint Chiefs Awards projects, we just met with NRCS and we've just approved, I think, 10 projects. And so we do see a lot of value in the Joint Chiefs because it gives us an opportunity to, more than anything, work as one USDA, where we bring in a number of USDA agencies together to do work across jurisdictional boundaries. And so we've been seeing a lot of value in that work and in that effort.
Yeah, and those are things, again, and I'll try to get our State Ag Commissioner out there as well. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, I beg your indulgence. This is on behalf of Senator Barrasso. He had one question he wanted me to ask. So with your indulgence, I'll go ahead and do that. The EPA recently revised its standard for particulate matter 2.5 under the Clean Air Act. And so the concern is that this new standard will effectively prohibit prescribed fires, prescribed burns in the West. That's something obviously we're very concerned about in the grasslands too, under this new standard. So under the standard, will emissions from prescribed fires put communities in violation of the Clean Air Act?
So how I would respond to that, Senator, is that we've got to make some choices. And if we do not allow prescribed fires to take place, then wildfires is going to take place. And while we argue and debate about the amount of particulate matter, we, I think, really need to have a really honest conversation about what is it that we're trying to achieve and what are the lesser evils of this issue around fire. But prescribed fire, I think, is necessary to take place.
Exactly. And so does Congress need to provide an exemption for prescribed fires under the Clean Air Act, in your opinion?
I think if Congress did provide that, we would be satisfied.
Okay. Thanks again for being here today and for your work. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Please pass along to Senator Barrasso that there's bipartisan support on that concept. So looking forward to working with him, Chief Moore. I now turn it over to Senator Cortez Masto for her questions.
Thank you. Chief, good to see you. Thank you,
Good to see you.
for being here. Not that you had a choice, but we appreciate you showing up. Over the past few years, the Forest Service, along with other public land management agencies, have seen a considerable investment, right? The Great American Outdoors Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, and Inflation Reduction Act have enabled major initiatives like the Wildfire Crisis Strategy. At the same time, the Forest Service has made a concerted effort to recruit and hire new staff to implement the work born from these major investments. I know this. Let me just give you an example. The Humboldt-Tyabe National Forest, which is mostly in Nevada, I understand has the highest staffing levels that you've had in decades. In 2022 and 2023, more permanent employees were hired than were lost to attrition, which had not been the case for many years. And last year, 64 new non-hires were brought on board in Nevada. But I'm curious to hear your outlook for the future, because unless Congress enacts extensions, all of these authorities have an expiration date. Yet the need, as you have been talking here today, for all of these initiatives, investments still remains. So how do you continue the pace of work? What do you want us to know with respect to where we should be focusing our attention and what we should be doing?
First, I want to just acknowledge to Congress and this committee how much we appreciate, what we've been able to do with the bill and IRA funding, because this has given us a chance to really hit the reset button in many ways. And what you mentioned on the Humboldt-Tyabe, we had been losing steadily a lot of employees for the last 20 years. And so the amount of requests and the amount of work continues to go up, the number of employers is going down. So we've been really challenged on how we work with the publics going forward. And so while we've created a lot of really great relationships through partners and through our community leaders, we really needed to beef up just the basic bare bone of the organization. And so Bill and IRA has allowed us to do that. And now that we have beefed it up, our goal, we lost 40% of a non-fire workforce over the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. And our ideal was to bring back half of that and then leverage the other half through partnerships. I'm happy to say that last year, when we look at partner contributions to what we've been able to do, they contribute about $970 million worth of value to the work that we do because of that leveraging. We've also been able to bring some employees back on board, and now we need to assess where we are with the number of employees because when we look at the attrition rate, I would like to think that people are happy in the Forest Service, they're not leaving as rapidly as they used to. But there's a lot of factors that go in there. So we don't have the attrition rate that we normally had been having. And so we're having to do an assessment and see, okay, what kind of shifts do we need to make in the organization? And so that's where we are from an organizational standpoint. But it's been so refreshing to be able to bring new employees into the workforce with new perspectives, new ideas, and to help us move into that next generation of natural resource management on our public lands.
Well, thank you. And I have to tell you, the men and women that work in the Forest Service in Nevada that I know love their jobs and are committed and truly believe in the mission. The biggest challenge we have is they're overworked at times and overwhelmed because there's an understaffing issue. So it's nice to see that you're focused on addressing those issues. I'm going to ask you, and you may not be able to answer it today, but if you could get back to me. Sure. Last summer, storms associated with the tropical storm Hillary swept through southern Nevada, damaging communities and infrastructure. Among the areas damaged was the Spring Mountain National Recreation Area, and it is managed by the Forest Service. The damage caused to this area by floods forced closures of many areas important for outdoor recreation. While much of that has reopened, I understand that some sites may stay closed for the foreseeable future, either because the site can't be restored to as it was or because not enough money is available. Can you, you may not be able to now, but at some point in time, can you speak to that and address why, or just in general, your efforts to restore that Spring Mountain area?
Yeah, no, I'll get back with you on some specifics about that specific area. I know generally when we have these types of things happen, a lot of times, and I'm not saying it happened there, but a lot of times when those facilities were designed, they probably put facilities in places that they probably should never have been. Not that this is the case. So we will look into the specifics of that to talk about why some facilities didn't come back. But then how do we mitigate that by adding others in other locations that was more suitable?
Thank you. I look forward to that follow-up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cortez Masto. I want to take this opportunity to thank again our two witnesses. Per Senator Cortez Masto, you really had no choice, but we do thank you for being here and for this discussion. A little bit of housekeeping. Members of the committee will have until close of business tomorrow to submit additional questions for the record. And with that, this committee now stands adjourned. Thank you very much.